Hello, economic students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have notes for Chapter 6, Section 3, Social Goals and Market Efficiency. So here we go. We're going to take a look at some of these terms, and as we go through, you're going to need to fill in what you need in the blanks. So we're just going to kind of read through this, and hopefully you can follow along here. So in order to achieve the 7 broad economic and social goals, we may require policies that distort allocations made in the market. Achieving the goal of economic security occasionally results in legislation changes that can benefit some and be detrimental to others. One of the common ways of achieving social goals involves setting prices at socially desirable levels. When this happens, prices are not allowed to adjust to their equilibrium levels. One type of control is what we call a price ceiling. This is the maximum legal price that can be charged for a product. So if you look below here, we have like a price ceiling that is set for rent. So that would be the maximum legal price. So if you wanted to make sure that rents don't go skyrocketing in areas where there's a high demand for housing, this is one way that you could control that. Another is what we call a price floor. If I can move this. And that is the lowest legal price that can be paid for a good or a service. Example of that is minimum wage. So over here on this other side, we have our price floor. And, minimum wage obviously has moved up a little bit since your textbook was published, but this is to make sure that people can be living and earning a wage that is going to make it, possible for them to be able to afford housing and to afford food for their families and such. Hence, that's why we have a price floor. So, price ceilings, this is an artificially set price that's below the equilibrium price by the government. And this occurs when demand is high for a good. That price is driven up beyond the means that most people can afford it. In California right now, especially in the Bay Area of San Francisco, housing prices are astronomical, and hence there are price ceilings that have been set to control rents so that people who are working, kind of low income jobs still can afford to have housing. Okay, a price floor, these are prices set artificially high by the government. And they're usually set when an important industry becomes overproductive. A lot of times this happens in agriculture. When we talk about the Great Depression, some of these price floors were set by some of our government programs of the New Deal, like the AAA, to make sure that farmers were still earning some money that certainly would allow them to stay on their farms and be able to care for their families and such. And yet, if the market would have been allowed to do what it would have done naturally, it probably would have pushed a lot of those farmers out of the market because they would not have been able to stay in the industry because of the prices decreasing. So a price floor is kind of a safety net in a way to kind of help protect producers that are out there. So going back to talking about agriculture, in the 1930s, farmers borrowed money from the Commodity Credit Corporation, other CCC, not to be confused with the Conservation Group. This was an agency of the Department of Agriculture in an effort to support farmers. The CCC used target prices, which is essentially a price floor on farm products. Farmers borrowed money at target price and pledged their crops as security. In other words, whatever they were going to earn the next year as far or whatever money that would have been drawn from their crop that they were planting now that would have been harvested later, that is what they were putting down to pledge to back up this loan. So since such loan had neither a penalty nor a further obligation if not paid back, it was called a non-recourse loan. So This loan program has some drawbacks, and that the Department of Agriculture ended up swimming and an enormous stockpile of food. And they ended up having to build a lot of grain elevators. And in some cases, they ended up dumping um, some of the products. So, particularly when we talk about like the dairy industry, they ended up dumping milk because of the fact that, they just had such a stockpile, they didn't know what to do with it. Next solution was to give farmers a deficiency payment. So, in this situation, farmers sold their crops on the open market for the best price that they could get, and then the government sent them a check to make up the difference between the actual market price and what was the target price to help offset the cost to the farm program, the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP as it's kind of known, was set up in 1985, and it offered to pay farmers not to farm. So a lot of times, farmers who participated in the CRP land, they put ground that had been tilled up, planted, and they converted it back to maybe pasture land. And part of that was to help encourage conservation. So that way, for example, if you had um, an area that you put in the CRP that was near a creek or a stream, you could protect the watershed that's there. But it also meant that you could also encourage wildlife to come back into a certain area. So, like groups like Pheasants Forever and such were definitely very interested in some of these CRP programs as far as bringing back, the habitat for the wildlife. So, under the program, farmers agreed to set aside previously farmed acres into a land bank, and they were paid an annual return. However, the effort to make agricultural output forces have not lowered the overall cost of farm programs. What's interesting is, the science behind agriculture has gotten so much better. We have better hybrids of crops. We have better um, methods of farming that have made land far more productive than it was, 40 years ago. So it is amazing, but sometimes these products or programs don't always keep up. So when the market talks, markets for the most part are impersonal mechanisms. They bring the buyers and sellers together, and when they are said to talk, when the prices move up or down significantly in response to some kind of outside event, such as a government policy change, or that could happen within the market itself. All right. Thank you very much.